I've worked as a night shift security guard for nearly a decade. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. My job was simple: watch the monitors, patrol the floors, and ensure nothing out of the ordinary happened. I was stationed at an old office building downtown, one that hadn't seen a major tenant in years. Most floors were vacant, and only a few small businesses still operated during the day. The building itself had a reputation. Nothing that ever made the news, but whispers floated around about strange occurrences, things moving on their own, shadowy figures seen through the windows at night, and inexplicable noises echoing through the empty hallways. I never paid much attention to the stories. People like to embellish, especially in a city with as much history as ours. But that was before I experienced something that made me question everything I thought I knew about reality. It was a quiet night, the kind where even the hum of the monitors seemed louder than usual. The air outside was thick with mist, blurring the streetlights below. I sat in the dim glow of the security room, sipping from a lukewarm cup of coffee, when the building's landline rang. That phone never rang, ever. I hesitated before answering. Security, I said, my voice steady, despite the unease creeping into my chest. At first, there was only static. Then, a whisper, faint and fragile, like dry leaves rustling in the wind. Help him. I'm on the 14th floor. My blood ran cold. The building only had 13 floors. I stared at the monitors, my fingers gripping the edge of the desk. I switched to the camera feed for the 13th floor. Dark, abandoned, lifeless. The tenants had moved out years ago, leaving behind an empty shell of dust-covered desks and flickering emergency lights. But then, movement, a shadow, just for a split second, slipping past the frame. I leaned in closer. Had I imagined it? The cameras were old, grainy, prone to glitches, but something deep in my gut told me I wasn't alone in the building. I reached for my flashlight and radio, trying to shake the creeping sense of dread clawing at my nerves. Maybe it was a homeless person who had somehow snuck in. Maybe it was a prank, or maybe I didn't want to think about the alternative. The elevator ride up felt like an eternity. The numbers climbed sluggishly, the soft hum of the machinery the only sound accompanying my shallow breaths. When the doors slid open, a wave of putrid air hit me, stale, metallic, with an underlying rot that turned my stomach. The hallway stretched before me, long and empty, bathed in the flickering red glow of the emergency exit signs. The silence was thick, almost tangible, pressing against my ears like cotton. Then a noise, a low, agonized sob. It came from the far end of the hall. I tightened my grip on the flashlight and stepped forward, my boots echoing against the linoleum floor. Each step felt heavier than the last. As I rounded the corner, I stopped cold. A woman stood in the middle of the hallway, facing the wall. Her long, tangled hair cascaded down her back like a curtain, her white dress stained and tattered. Bare feet were blackened, as if she had been walking through soot. She let out another sharp, broken sob. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Ma'am," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't respond. I took another step closer, lifting my flashlight. The beam flickered. The bulb buzzed and dimmed before cutting out entirely. Then she moved, slowly, unnaturally, her head twisted toward me, her body remaining still, and where her face should have been nothing, a hollow void, gaping abyss of darkness that seemed to pull the very air from the room. A guttural, static-laced wail erupted from her featureless face. The sound tore through my ears, through my skull, through my very bones. I stumbled back, my heartbeat hammering against my ribs. She lunged. I ran, my legs burned as I sprinted for the elevator, the hallway stretching impossibly long behind me. The doors stood open like a beacon, and I threw myself inside, slamming the button for the ground floor. The doors hesitated. Then, as they began to close, she appeared, right there, inches from me, her hands slamming against the metal with an unnatural force. The impact shook the entire elevator. For one brief, horrifying moment, I locked eyes, if you could call them that with that black, empty void where her face should be, and then the doors sealed shut. I collapsed against the wall, gasping for air, my hands trembling so violently I could barely hold onto my flashlight. The descent felt endless. When the doors finally opened, I staggered out, legs unsteady. I half expected to see her waiting for me, but the lobby was empty. I rushed back to the security room, my fingers fumbling as I flipped through the camera feeds. Static. Every screen was filled with blinding, flickering static. Then the phone rang again. I turned to it slowly, my breath caught in my throat. The same whisper, soft and distant. "Help me. I'm on the 14th floor." I used to work the night shift at a 24-hour gas station on the outskirts of town. It wasn't exactly the most exciting job, but it paid the bills. Most nights were quiet, just a few truckers stopping in for coffee, the occasional local stumbling in for cigarettes. But some nights were different. I had been on shift for about 6 months when it happened. It was a slow night, the kind where the hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant chirping of insects were the only sounds keeping me company. The clock on the wall read 3:07 a.m. I was restocking shelves when I saw something out of the corner of my eye. Movement outside. A man in a dark hoodie stood near the gas pumps facing the store. He wasn't moving, wasn't pumping gas, just standing there, watching. The hood covered most of his face, and under the harsh glow of the station lights, his posture looked wrong, stiff, unnatural. I waited, expecting him to come inside. Customers would sometimes hesitate before entering, maybe looking for their wallet or deciding if they really needed to buy something. But minutes passed, and he remained perfectly still. A strange unease settled in my stomach. I moved behind the counter and glanced at the security monitor. The grainy feed showed him exactly as I saw with my own eyes, motionless, eerily silent, staring directly at the store. Something wasn't right. Then I noticed something worse. His reflection in the glass wasn't mirroring him. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe the poor lighting was playing tricks on me. I blinked hard, rubbing my eyes. But no, the man outside remained frozen in place, while his reflection in the store window was moving. I watched, my breath catching in my throat. The reflection tilted its head to the side, an unnatural, jerky motion, like a puppet with its strings yanked too hard. Then it grinned, not a normal smile, a wide, unnatural grin stretching far beyond human capability, teeth impossibly white against the darkness of the glass. My stomach dropped. My mind scrambled to make sense of what I was seeing. I forced myself to look at the actual man outside. He was still standing, completely still, hood pulled low over his face. He hadn't moved an inch, but his reflection had. I stumbled backward, nearly knocking over a display of snack cakes. My fingers fumbled for my phone in my pocket, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. I tore my eyes away for just a second to unlock my phone, my fingers trembling. When I looked back up, the man was gone. The gas station lot was empty, but his reflection was still there. The grinning figure in the glass raised a hand and waved only, its fingers bent backward at impossible angles. My breath hitched as the reflection took a step forward, not toward the other side of the glass, toward me. It was coming through. A deep, guttural scraping noise filled the air, like nails dragging across metal. Fading, the reflection's grand widened, and cracks began forming along the glass, spiderwebbing outward from where its hands pressed against the surface. I did the only thing my body allowed me to do. I ran. I bolted toward the back room, slamming the door behind me and locking it. My chest heaved with panicked breaths as I backed into the corner, my shaking hands still clutching my phone. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but what the hell was I supposed to say? Hey, there's a man outside whose reflection is trying to kill me. No one would believe me. The scraping sound grew louder. My skin prickled as I realized it was coming from the door now. Slow, deliberate scratches, like fingernails lightly trailing along the wood. I pressed my back against the wall, squeezing my eyes shut, willing whatever it was to go away. It didn't. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The silence was deafening. I could hear my own heartbeat thudding against my ribs. Minutes passed, maybe an hour. I didn't move until the first light of dawn seeped in through the cracks of the storeroom door. When I finally gathered enough courage to step out, the gas station was exactly as I had left it. Shelves stocked, registers untouched, the glass windows intact, except for one thing. On the glass near the entrance, where the reflection had stood, there was a single, smudged handprint. Long, slender fingers pressed into the glass. The fingers bent backward. My manager arrived at 7 a.m. I was still pale and shaking when he walked in. He took one look at me and sighed. "You saw him too, huh? Huh?" he muttered, walking past me to punch in for his shift. I felt the breath leave my lungs. "What? The guy in the reflection?" He said it so casually, like he was talking about the weather. "You're not the first, but probably won't be the last." Ha! Stared at him, waiting for him to explain, to laugh and tell me it was all some elaborate prank. But he just shook his head and started making coffee like nothing had happened. "Just don't look too long," he added after a moment. "And don't acknowledge him. He doesn't like that." That was my last night shift at the gas station. I quit 2 days later, but sometimes, late at night, when I'm walking past a window or a mirror, I swear I still see that grin staring back at me. Working the night shift at a small roadside motel wasn't exactly my dream job, but it paid the bills. It was the kind of place that catered to weary travelers looking for a cheap bed to crash in before hitting the road again. 15 rooms, a flickering neon sign, and a front desk with a rusted bell that rarely saw much action. Most nights were uneventful. I'd sit behind the counter, flipping through channels on the ancient box TV, sipping bad coffee and counting the minutes until sunrise. But that night was different. It was a little past midnight when the man walked in. He didn't say a word, just shuffled up to the counter and slid a crumpled $50 bill across the desk. His hands were thin, almost skeletal, with dirt caked under his fingernails. His face was pale, gaunt, with sunken eyes that looked like they hadn't seen sleep in years. The way he stared at me made my skin crawl, but I forced a polite smile. "Just one night?" I asked, reaching for the guest log. He didn't answer, just gave a slow nod. I hesitated before handing him the key. Something about him made me uneasy. Maybe it was the way his clothes looked outdated, like they belonged to a different era. Or maybe it was the deep, hollow look in his eyes. It's like he wasn't really there. I glanced at the key I had instinctively grabbed. Room 308. My stomach dropped. We didn't have a room 308. The motel had only 2 floors. The rooms went up to 215. There was no 3rd floor, no room 308. And yet, I had given him a key that clearly had the number 308 on the tag. A chill ran down my spine as the man took the key from my hand. Without another word, he turned and walked down the hall, disappearing into the shadows. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the empty hallway. I felt like I had just handed that man a key to nowhere, or worse, somewhere that shouldn't exist. I had to check it out. Grabbing the master key from under the desk, I hesitated before stepping out. The hallway seemed darker than usual, the buzzing fluorescent lights overhead casting strange, flickering shadows. My footsteps echoed as I made my way toward the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last dot. As I climbed to the 2nd floor, the air grew thick, stale. Strange heaviness settled in my chest, making it harder to breathe. The doors to the other rooms looked normal, plain white with gold numbers till I reached the end of the hall and saw it. A door that shouldn't exist. It stood alone at the very end of the corridor where a solid wall should have been. The door was different from the others, old, wooden, with deep, jagged scratches along the frame. The number 308 was nailed to it, but the metal numbers were rusted. almost unreadable. I swallowed hard, pressing my ear against the wood. Silence. I reached for the knob, but my fingers hesitated just above the cold metal. My instincts screamed at me to turn around, to go back downstairs and pretend I never saw any of this. But I had to know. I had to see what was inside. I slid the master key into the lock. A soft click echoed through the empty hallway. The door creaked open, revealing darkness. I stepped inside. The air was frigid, far colder than the rest of the motel. I could see my breath in the dim light. The room smelled old, like dust and decay, like something had been rotting in there for decades. The furniture was covered in white sheets, draped like ghosts, frozen in time. Then I saw him. The man from the front desk stood in the corner of the room, his back turned to me. His posture was unnatural, rigid, unmoving. Something about the way he stood sent an overwhelming wave of dread through me. I forced myself to speak, "Sir." No response. I took a step closer. My hands trembled. "Sir, are you okay?" Slowly, so slowly, it made my stomach turn. He began to move. His shoulders twitched, his head jerking unnaturally as he started to turn toward me. When I saw his face, my breath caught in my throat. His skin was wrong, stretched, sagging, like it didn't fit properly. His mouth twisted into a grin too wide, unnatural, as if something else was wearing his face like a mask. And then he vanished. The door slammed shut behind me. I spun around, heart hammering in my chest. The room was pitch black now, the air thick and suffocating. I fumbled for the doorknob, yanking at it desperately, but it wouldn't budge. My fingers were ice cold, my breath coming in ragged gasps. A whisper filled the room. "Get out." The voice was right behind me. I didn't think I just ran. I don't remember how I got the door open, how I got out, how I made it back downstairs. One moment, I was trapped in that impossible room. In the next, I was back behind the front desk, drenched in sweat, gasping for air. Everything looked normal. The hallway, the front desk, flickering neon sign outside. I forced myself to check. The guest log, there was no record of a man checking in that night. But when I looked down at the desk, my blood ran cold. The crumpled $50 bill he had given me was still there, and it was dated 1956. I grabbed the bill with shaking hands, examining it closely. The texture was different. The paper yellowed with age. The ink was faded, the edges frayed. It was real, too real. I didn't know what to do. My mind was racing, trying to rationalize what had just happened. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I was just overtired. But deep down, I knew the truth. That man wasn't human. Hey, whatever. Room 308 was. It wasn't part of this world. I didn't last much longer at the motel. I quit a week later. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching me, waiting. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of movement in the security monitor shadows, shifting in places they shouldn't be. And sometimes, late at night, I'd hear it, a whisper drifting through the empty halls. "Get out."